Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the Select Board meeting for November 17, 2020. Like all Select Board meetings and other meetings in the town of Brookline during this COVID emergency, we're holding this meeting virtually using the Zoom platform. You should be aware of the fact that the meeting will be recorded, and each board member is in their remote locations, and a quorum is available in that manner. So let's start off the meeting with any announcements or updates. None? Okay. Well, one announcement is we're going to have town meeting in a little while, so.
I'll give a short announcement. I won't be able to talk about this when I talk about the article, so I'll talk about it now, which is that we have 7 weekends of construction with the T shut down to finish the overbuild at the high school. And we've passed 6 of those weekends pretty successfully. We've gotten done a lot. This past weekend they had to shut down a couple hours early because of the weather. But other than that, we've had really a very successful period. And we hope and expect to finish the overbuild and the construction around the T for the building. Next weekend will be our last time. So that will be, I'll report to you next week about it. But I think that that's going to be an exciting moment, because then all we'll have left is the station. So.
Does that mean that that'll be the end of the noise bylaw waivers?
No, because we will have the station to work on. But the station is separate from the building. And so at least the building will be done. And then they'll be focusing on the end, from the T toward Brington, they'll focus on the building there. So right now they've been focusing on the front, the part that goes over the T.
Okay. Any questions or updates, further updates, Mr. Van Scoyac?
This is just to say that we did indeed have the Veterans Day observances on Wednesday. Our chair, Bernard Green himself, was a featured speaker. The police chief, Mark Morgan, was a speaker. Tommy Vitolo, also our state rep. And I just want to reassure everyone who couldn't make it that despite COVID and despite the requirements of masks and distancing and so on, it was a very meaningful and moving ceremony. I think it meant a lot to the vets who were there. Bill McGroarty, our Director of Veterans Affairs, deserves enormous credit for keeping that tradition going, and especially keeping it going this particular year. Every now and then I get comments from people who know that I have been to one of these events because maybe I had some photographs on social media or you name it. And often the comment is, isn't it great that people still remember and that people still show up for events of this nature? And wouldn't it be great if we could get more people to show up? But the turnout was good. And if anybody has been thinking that these customs and these traditions are fading away, like General MacArthur said, old soldiers do, I think they would have been pleasantly surprised by this year's observances. And I hope they'll think about maybe taking part as witnesses to the memorial services or observances coming up in the spring, and then the Veterans Day observances again a year from now.
Good, thank you. Ms. Hamilton.
I am a member of the Brookline Rotary Club, and I just wanted to remind everyone that the Brookline Rotary Club is doing a Thanksgiving dinner fundraiser, providing food for people who need it. For more information, please visit brooklinerotary.org, or you can call 617-963-0901 to receive some terrific food for anyone who finds themselves needing food this holiday season.
Good, thank you. Any other updates, announcements? Yeah, I assume the Rotary Thanksgiving dinner is going to be delivered to people so that they can have their virtual Thanksgiving celebrations with family members.
Yeah, I believe that they're packaging it up. You make a reservation ahead of time, contact free, and you can drive up, pick up, and share with anyone in your household.
Good. Okay, Mr. Fernandez.
Sure. I'll briefly, just the tip of the hat to our town administrator, Mel Kleckner, and others. A while back we had talked about the COVID testing that's happening in Brookline, and talking about how we can make sure that folks who are uninsured also have access to testing, and that they were able to figure this out to make this work. So folks who are either symptomatic or have been in close contact with someone that's tested positive, even if they're uninsured, have access to receive a test through the town. Mel, please correct anything I've said that might be wrong, but just wanted to thank you and others who worked to make this happen. So thank you.
Correct, thank
Could I
you.
ask a question about that? When you say, I think when you say uninsured, you mean people who don't have insurance, but I think what you mean is people who have insurance, but their insurance won't pay. Is that right?
No,
No.
no.
Okay, so,
Just talking about uninsured people.
okay.
So if their insurance won't pay, they just have to pay whatever the cost
Yeah,
is.
$140, right?
Okay, anything else? Okay, Ms. Fields, anyone in the public queue?
At this time, no one has signed up in advance for public comment. There are 14 attendees present.
Okay, let's go on to our main agenda. Minutes for Tuesday, November 10. I didn't see them in our packet. Did I miss
Sent
something?
you a note that they are not going to be ready until Thursday.
Okay, good. So we'll skip over that. Question of accepting a $1,000 donation from a Brookline resident to the police department for bicycle equipment, which will be used to purchase a new bike for the bicycle unit. Any information on that the select board should know?
Just whatever we put in your packet.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. All in
We should
favor?
thank whomever gave it, whom I gather was anonymous, so whomever did give the donation, we should thank.
Yes.
don't
We
know
always thank people who give donations to the town for a variety of purposes that they think are important. So all in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Renskoya,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Question of awarding and executing the license, maintenance, and indemnification agreement with 5 Washington Square, the fee owner, LLC, I guess that's the name, fee owner LLC, relative to the developer's planned stormwater drainage system. Any,
Well, this is an existing situation. It's actually a property over the line in Boston. What we're proposing, the property is being developed, and provides us an opportunity to sort out this easement and stormwater collection, and actually, I think makes it clearer and better in the town's interest. I think Aaron Galentine could verify that with you.
Good evening,
Galentine.
Erin Galentine, Commissioner of Public Works. That's right. This is there's an existing drain line that is underneath the property that is to become 5 Washington Street, and is named 5 Washington Square. You'll see that in the license agreement. So this is a drain line. It is a utility. It drains to Village Brook Drain. And what this license agreement does is it holds the property owner responsible for maintenance of this drain line, and also gives the town the authority to go in and maintain this drain line if the property owner does not do so. So we're looking to have this license agreement authorized and signed by the board, and then we will be moving to formalize an easement that would go before town meeting in May.
Yeah. Any questions? No. I move approval of the of awarding and executing the license, maintenance, and indemnification agreement for 5 Washington Square Fee Owner LLC. All in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac,
Aye.
and chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Question of approving contract amendment number 2 for consulting and engineering services between the town of Brookline and Brown and Caldwell for stormwater on-call services. The amendment does not change the value of the contract, but extends the duration and terms of the agreement through October 31st, 2021. Commissioner Galantine, do you have something to add to that?
Nothing, just to add that this is a really important contract and service as it relates to our compliance with the DEP MS4 permit. And some of that work was held up early on due to COVID. So there's no change in value. It's just a change in the sort of final date of the contract. So it's purely an extension.
Okay, any questions from the board? Okay, I move approval of the contract amendment number 2, consulting and engineering services with Caldwell, Brown and Caldwell for stormwater on-call services. All in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac,
Aye.
chair votes aye.
Thank you. I'll see you later on tonight.
Thank you. Authorization to hire. Question of approving the request for authorization to hire a public health nurse for the nursing and epidemiological division of the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Jett.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This position is very critical to the health department. As you know, I've already lost 2 positions. Pat Maloney, my assistant director, and my emergency management coordinator, Cheryl Snyder. But I also have Barbara Wesley, who is my nurse of over 20 plus years. She is retiring February the 5th. I would like to replace her ahead of time to train, because I hate to lose this position and be looking for somebody in the middle of a pandemic.
Good. Okay, any questions? Okay, Dr. Jett, you're not wearing a tuxedo there, are you?
No, I am not. I would
just
like
wanna
for
make-
somewhere to go, but unfortunately there's nowhere to go.
I just want to make sure you weren't going to some formal event. Any rate. Any questions from the select board? No. I move approval of the request for authorization to hire a public health nurse for the nursing and epidemiology division in the Department of Health and Human Services. All in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac,
Aye.
and chair votes aye.
Thank you, and see you soon.
Okay, yep. Boards and commission interviews, Preservation Commission. David King is appearing before us. Is he here? David King, right. Okay. Mr. King, please introduce yourself and your interest in the Preservation Commission. And you're being reappointed, is that the case?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been on the commission for
Forever.
over a decade. So
Okay.
I'm it's very interesting for me to see how Brookline is developing and to be involved in these districts and to be working with really interesting architects and other members of the commission just to help shepherd these preservation districts and see how they're going to evolve in the next couple of years. So in the last few years, we changed we did a change to the demo delay law, which I think was very helpful in that made demolition delay not transferable from one owner to another. So it's been interesting to interact with the town and really interesting to get to know Brookline over the past 10 years. And just working with the buildings is very interesting to me too, because I'm an architect, and to imagine what other architects have done and how that might be affected by new construction or changes is obviously very interesting to me. And also looking at this in the light of renewable energy and how we can help our guidelines evolve so that we're keeping in mind renewable energy goals as well has been interesting. So it's just been a very good experience.
Good. Any questions from the board?
I'd like to ask a question.
Of course.
David, it's good to see you. I applaud the ZBA decision and your decision, which to lift the demolition delay on the former Newbury site. And to me, that signals that your commission is willing to look at these buildings and decide whether they deserve our protection. And I believe Mitten House does, but I was not very fond of the other buildings, and I don't think the neighborhood was particularly caring about them either. So I'm wondering whether you sense some sort of a difference at the Preservation Commission level about this issue. We need to save stuff that's not necessarily so great.
Well, I don't feel like there's been a difference in the time that I've been here. I think that, oftentimes we are moving to save mid-century modern houses that a lot of people just look at it and say, oh, that's just a goofy ranch. What do we want that for? But I think, at least in my experience, we've always tried to be considerate about, what is worth saving and what isn't. And a majority of projects that are come up for demolition aren't even considered by us because they're looked at by the staff beforehand. And in most of the cases, they just say, this is not something that the Preservation Commission should consider. So I'm sure we have erred at times and been a little too zealous in saving something, but I think in general, we try to be reasonable about what deserves saving and not.
Good. Ms. Hamilton.
So to build off of that, I've heard just, various accounts, especially from people who want to build in sustainability and use different types of materials and whatnot, that the Preservation Commission has been at times very frustrating. What's your view on how we can preserve, what needs to be preserved, but also adapt and make our buildings, that much more sustainable as we go forward?
Well, we're actually looking at this now because we are looking at the design guidelines, which haven't been revisited for about 30 years. except, I mean, we've added sustainable guidelines, I think about 5 years ago, but we are going through piece by piece. Windows is always, has often been a bugbear for people who complain about sustainable design. So we are, I mean, we always have taken a close look at that, and we believe in the sustainability of keeping original windows with storms. And there are a lot of arguments to and fro about that, but, and our position isn't rock solid on every case. We try to be flexible. Another issue has been wooden gutters, which have just been a pain for a lot of people for many years, and Preservation Commission asked that you keep them and replace them. And this year we have finally said, well, you know, they're 40 feet in the air. They just don't work anymore because they don't provide enough space for the water to gather and come down. So we are moving to, we have allowed fiberglass gutters in several situations. Solar, we are, in general, we basically allow solar installations. I think the caveat is that when it chews up a slate roof, that's a loss for the town. If someone wants to put a solar installation on top of a slate roof, and it can basically damage the slate roof, the original slate roof, inalterably. So, I mean, I think from sustainability point of view, I mean, most of us are green architects, most of us are LEED certified. We're also trying to look at this in the big picture in terms of embodied energy and you know, what's taken out when you throw out gutters, when you throw out windows, when you start taking the building apart. The newer windows probably won't be as good. They won't be the same, they won't have the same wood that the old windows have. They'll have insulating glass, which has basically a 20-year lifetime. So we're trying to deal with all these issues, and everyone's not always happy with our solutions, but I think in general, my feeling is people we don't hear great frustration from most of the people we are dealing with. So we are trying to be respectful and attentive to everyone, but we're a regulatory body, and we're trying to protect preservation districts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Ranscoya.
I won't hold you to this, but are there any parts of town that you know, if you could be the sole designator of historic districts that you feel should be historic district protected but aren't?
Yes, I think there are, but it's not really our place to proselytize or get people to make districts. A district has to really be generated by the people who are living there, and it's most often generated by a demolition. I think the area around Monmouth Street is very precious to the town. I think actually the area across Washington Street, I think it's Salisbury Street. There are some beautiful streets around there too, that are really beautiful parts of Brookline that that are very cohesive too. And I think that there is, well, I don't know if there's an area that is trying to consider being a district now, or just several houses that want to become part of the Lawrence district. But it's not our place to go out and sort of look for districts. If people want to make a district, then it has to be generated from those people.
Thank you for the answer.
Okay, thank you. I think the board is going to vote on Preservation Commission positions probably at some future meeting, unless there's any interest in doing it now. Devin, do we have additional interviewees?
Yeah, a good chunk of this commission
Okay.
is going to re-interview for reappointment, and there are also some new applicants.
Okay, great. So we'll let you know sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Okay, further review and possible reconsideration and vote on warrant articles for the 2020 special town meeting starting in what, an hour and a half. Okay, so let's start off. I'm sorry, someone say something.
Kevin, do we have another
There's
applicant?
there's a second candidate listed on.
There's another applicant, Mr. Chair, for preservation.
There
Okay.
is a
Okay,
second person, but she is actually not in the meeting yet. So I don't know if you want to just move forward, and then when she comes, we could maybe go back.
Okay, again, I got an old agenda. What is the person's name?
Phoebe Morse.
I'm sorry, who?
Phoebe
Okay.
Morse.
Do we have an application from Phoebe Morse? I don't
Yeah, it
see
should be in your packet.
I didn't find it.
Not seeing it there.
I'm looking at the stuff you emailed me shortly before the meeting, Devin, and I don't see it.
I can send you the link in the chat, but she's
Yes,
not here.
Send the link to all of us, because I was looking at the packet that was sent out on Friday and it wasn't in that.
Okay, and there wasn't an updated, we don't need to, I'll send you the link now.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Article 10, short-term rentals. This should be an interesting discussion.
Well, Bernard, I
Melissa?
would recommend that we start with Article 1 of the second special town meeting, because it's very likely we'll get to that tonight.
Okay.
So,
Want to start off?
Despite what we had initially said earlier before we started the meeting, apparently now there is a revised intent of the petitioner to modify the advisory committee proposal. Have you seen that, Melissa, or is it the same one that was produced late last night?
So I believe, you have a couple of things that are now in the supplement. So you have supplement 3, which is the advisory committee resolution on the budget. That was discussed last night with the advisory committee and the petitioners. After the advisory committee meeting concluded, the petitioners sent an amendment on that motion. And so that is supplement 4. And I've heard that the petitioner has switched between moving and not moving. And I believe that currently they are looking to move supplement 4. So you've got either the advisory committee position, or you have, and I don't know, Devin, if we might want to promote Deborah. I thought I saw her here. She might want to explain kind of where they're currently at.
Well, Melissa, could we see the AC motion first? I mean, so we know what we're talking about, because I haven't seen it.
Sure, just give me a minute.
Maybe you should just put up the red line version that Ms. Brown has, because it shows you both versions sort of at the same document.
Sure. My VPN is frozen, so just give me a minute. So what you are looking at, that's the wrong town meeting, hold on. So this is supplement 4. And this is the petitioner revision on top of the advisory committee motion.
So the advisory committee motion was a result of negotiations with the petitioner over, I don't know what period of time. And the result is a resolution that basically does what Warrant Article 32 does, and that is, do some research and investigation before we commit to making or making commitments of funds. So that was what the advisory committee proposed, and I guess this is an amendment to that. Do we want to have Ms. Brown explain the reasons for changes? And this came out after the advisory committee voted, I think 27-0 in favor of what we thought was an agreed resolution between the advisory committee and the petitioners. Except there was some discussion or disagreement over the paragraph that talks about the anti-aid amendment.
Is that the 5th whereas?
Oh, let's see.
So it's right here in the strike through, Nancy.
Right. There's a lot of back and forth between the petitioners and town council. Neil Wyszynski suggested that we go with the advisory committee resolution, but just delete that paragraph since it doesn't have any real significance and it's kind of a distraction. Any consideration of spending town funds will take into consideration the anti-aid amendment and the advice of town council with respect to that.
I saw that Deborah's promoted. I don't know, Deborah, if you want to add anything further to what I've explained.
Sure. Thank you all for having me. I do want to say very quickly, this was a fairly amicable negotiation, as the chair referred to. But there were some things that we did disagree with. One of them was the anti-aid language, and there was some emails that went back and forth, and I'm not sure that the language in fact adds anything other than confusion to the document. Once we get into the resolve clauses, what we were really looking for is additional clarity. And I would add that, in terms of the distinction between supplement 4 and, for that matter, warrant article 32, is most of the work here we're talking about happening between now and the end of the calendar year. So I mean, those are the big differences. Is once you get into the resolved clauses, and they're fairly straightforward. The last one, it was a little vague and unclear, and honestly, we were going back and forth, and it was just something that got missed. So that's it in a nutshell. I think that the negotiations, I thought they went really well. People came to the table, with, the best of intentions, and, how you can be 7/8 of the way there on something. And I think that's where we are. And this 1/8 is important, but I have to say that AC, did a really good job in identifying the issues and trying to get this done.
Any questions from the board? Ms. Heller.
Well, I do have a question about the additional language in numbers 1 and 2. My concern is that we need to make sure we've reserved enough and we can respond to any emergencies that occur through June of next year. And I mean, for instance, last year we had the whole Davis Path footbridge, which came up at the very end of the year, the fiscal year. And luckily we had money in the reserve fund to cover that. So there are things that do come up and that are legitimate issues. I think that I would not want to obligate us to take money from the reserve fund for this. I think the CARES Act is a very, very good way of dealing with this, because a lot of the problems are caused by COVID. And I think, so that's my concern. I would not want to bring the reserve fund into this. For the reasons that I've said. I think the reserve fund is there for a reason. We don't know, we don't even know what kind of snow year we're gonna have. We never know that. We don't know that sometimes till May. We can have snowstorms as late as May. I mean, this year you had one, I wasn't here, I was in California, but you had one in October, which is really unusual. So I think that's problematic.
Okay, Mr. Benskoyak?
Thank you. I want to preface a brief remark by saying that Deborah and others have been part of some very good and constructive conversations with the likes of me and some other folks in the past several days. And I don't want to get overly optimistic, but I really feel as though progress is being made in establishing lines of communication and in understanding one another better, so that we aren't so far apart when we set out to do something, and then we have the capability of getting closer together and coming to some kind of agreement. Having said that, you knew there was going to be a but, right, Deborah? I think there's a process question here, and it's a very important one, because I was kind of on the sidelines. Thankfully, didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting yesterday. While some folks from the advisory committee worked with Deborah and others to do the very substantial work, and I do mean substantial, of sort of moving what was being asked of town meeting from the category of a amended budget appropriation to the category of a resolution that would steer the town mainly via the select board towards some kind of ongoing commitment to take a serious look at whether we have the capability to do some things that we're not currently doing, vis-a-vis the needs of, say, the Brookline Food Pantry to meet the expanded needs of people who show up for food, or meet the needs of the BHA, vis-a-vis the situation that a lot of kids in BHA housing have been thrown into, where it's essential to keeping up with schoolwork that they have internet connections, and they don't have that. So there was this very hard work going on all day yesterday, which looked at those needs and came up with a resolution that will point the town towards looking even more at those needs and trying to measure those needs against the revenue situation that we're in right now with the town and with the needs that would be competing for revenues from the operations that we fund on an annual basis of the town and the schools. And then an agreement was reached, and it got a substantial vote of approval from the advisory committee by the end of the day. And I mean, by the end of the day, it was well into the evening. And so here we are on the select board, and all I know is that there was an agreement that was made and that was widely favored on the advisory committee. And if I tinker with that now by going along with some changes, I have no way of knowing if I'm going to agree to something that's going to cause the advisory committee to fracture. And all of a sudden we've lost the majority of the advisory committee, and we're deep into rehashing a lot of stuff that we thought we had resolved. And so, even if I saw a phrase here or an underlining there that I thought I might be able to go along with, until the advisory committee has taken a look at this, they're the ones that did the work on the resolution that everybody thought there was unanimous consent to. I'm not going to touch a word of it until I know how the advisory committee is going to respond to, a sort of late breaking request to change some of the wording that they thought everyone had consented to. And so it's the difficult procedural position. I think perhaps some others are in it as well.
John, I'll just mention that the advisory committee is not meeting before town meeting tonight. So the only position that you have is supplement 3.
Yes. Thank you, Melissa.
Okay. Melissa, let me ask a question. In item 5, there's actually what I would call a Scrivener's error, where advisory committee should have been there, but community was used. I think, can we just accept that as a Scrivener's error and not, if we accept the rest of the advisory committee's resolution, can we just include that in our acceptance?
I did not draft the resolution, so I don't know if it was a Scrivener's error. So,
Chair, we weren't sure either, because community did sort of look out of place, but that was the language that was there, and that's one of those things that we want to change. Also, most of the other things that we want to change actually were comments that we made to AC. So it's not like, John, there wasn't anything that they hadn't seen. It was just that they chose not to accept the language. So.
Yeah, and there was pretty strong opposition to in bringing in the reserve fund, even by implication, as a funding source. So I don't think those are small matters.
May I comment on that?
I'm sorry. Who's that?
This is Bonnie. I'm also a
petitioner. Bonnie. Okay.
Bonnie Bastian, town meeting member, precinct 5. I just want to point out that the language that you're talking about in the first resolve does not lock anybody in to using the reserve fund. It says other possible funding, including the appropriated budget reserve fund. It does not say that we need it to come from that money.
Yeah, but I think advisory committee was concerned about the camel's nose under the tent.
But as a practical matter, the camel's nose was under the tent the day we filed the budget amendment, if not before.
No,
I mean, it's kind of a fiction to say that the reserve fund can't be used. I mean, if anything, this is just more clarifying language than expanding anything. And in terms of an obligation, and there's no obligation here. It is a point of clarification, and maybe just draftspersonship to include the language.
Okay. I see that Paul Warren is wanting to speak from the advisory committee's point of view.
I'd like to jump in as well, but I'm happy to hear from Paul first.
Why don't you speak first?
Okay. One of the things that the original version did is that it asked the town to consider using municipal funds for some of these purposes. Generally speaking, we use federal funds for the CDBG, CARES Act in this case, and money from the housing trust, et cetera. But to consider that was taken away in the sort of the version that was agreed upon last night. And I see it back in here. And what it's essentially, as I read it, and maybe others are reading it differently, as I read it, it says, I read it as we'll use the CARES funds, we'll use whatever federal funds are available to us. But if things continue and we are in extraordinary circumstances, and there's no, it's to me the same thing that Nancy mentioned about a snow emergency. I don't know how a food emergency is any different than a snow emergency, frankly. And if we agree that we should have reserves in the case of a snow emergency, if there are no other funds or all other funds have been expended, all federal funds, it's all been expended, and here we are in the midst of a food emergency, I don't know why we wouldn't leave the door open to tap those resources, if legally allowed to do so, to meet the needs of residents in our community. That's it.
Okay, Mr. Warren?
Hi, thank you, Paul Warren, Precinct 1 town meeting member, also a member of the advisory committee that not only spent considerable time on this late last minute submission, but I also sat through hours and hours of subcommittee meetings for warrant article 32 and 33. So I'm very familiar. I also want to preface my comments with, I'm pretty sure I'm probably the only person on this Zoom that's actually lived in public housing, affordable housing, has had food stamps, did WIC, and lived on Mass Health in my younger days. So I speak to this from experience. So I'm very sensitive to this issue. But I'm gonna channel a little bit of what occurred at the select board. First, I want you to know that this is very important. Feeding people, no one is arguing about feeding people. It's absolutely true. I spent a considerable amount of time on Fridays speaking directly with the executive director of the food pantry and also the executive director of the Brookline Housing Authority. So those conversations greatly reduced the original ask that was in the budget amendment by confirming that these numbers weren't completely, needed some tweaking. And so we had those conversations, and the resolution came forward for advisory. There's a few points about the resolution. I'm with John Banskoya. I do not believe that given the late nature of this thing came in at the last possible minute. It could have come in over the summer. It could have come in during the subcommittee meetings where none of this money was discussed directly. It could have been asked for. We could have had discussions in a public vetting process. It came in at the very, very last second. And that's what's the most difficult thing. We had everybody scrambling. Mel, the chair of the advisory committee, which a number of people, including myself, I spent a considerable amount of time on this. The advisory committee is very concerned about naming the reserve fund in here. The reserve fund, we spent a considerable amount of time making sure that the reserve fund was going to be sufficient to deal with emergencies. Food is an emergency. We can actually, we could say that without a doubt. But we just transferred 1.75 million to the schools. They're also going to be looking for probably another $1.5 million or more. And we still don't know what school is, what's happening with snow. We need to be very cautious about the reserve fund. And so the advisory committee unanimously, this wasn't like 20 to 2 to 1. This was a unanimous vote to take out to not include, not accept the amendment for the reserve fund. And I feel very strongly about that as an individual and also as an advisory committee member. I also spent a lot of time on the phone with Mel, and Mel did yeoman's work on figuring how to help make this happen. The provision 1 says up to $300,000 for food. I spoke directly with the Brookline Food Pantry. The food alone is probably around $200,000. That number, the $300,000 includes a refrigerator and transportation for the food and tents and heaters. That total is $291,000. Mel found through CARES up to $300,000. There's plenty there. It can be acted on immediately without having to talk about the reserve fund. With respect to the Brookline Housing Authority, issues with their kitchens, with respect to the internet, which the $140,000 that they proposed for the internet, that can't be implemented till June. So it helps nobody in the Brookline Housing Authority with respect to schools for internet, because it can't be done at the minimum until June. So that all the components around these other items, Bernard, absolutely, they're covered under warrant Article 32. It's a duplication. Now, I think we left some of that in there because it's important, and let's expose it and let's air it. But this idea that we need to nail and name the reserve fund, I can tell you that from my point of view, I won't speak for them, but based on the vote of 22-0, unanimously, the advisory committee said, no, do not name the reserve fund. If we need to come back to that later, we can come back to it. But for this pass, no, there's 300,000. Mel identified it. It's available. He's committing to it. If the select board says you commit to doing it, it's done. And then we can go do the rest of the assessment with not only Article 32, but the rest of the information that's in, within the resolution. So I would strongly encourage you to adopt the advisory committee's resolution and strike the anti-aid amendment, which everybody is wrapped around the axle about. That's what my recommendation to you would be. And I think the advisory committee would support that wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Okay, just for the record, my reference to warrant Article 32 acknowledged that this resolution covers fiscal year 21. Warrant Article 32, for the most part, covers fiscal year 22. But my point is that the process that's laid out in warrant Article 32 is similar to the process laid out in this resolution, in that we investigate first and then we fund what we found to be the needs.
Right.
As opposed to the other way around.
I'll add one more point, Bernard, that everybody admits that there's tension between two things: figuring out a long-term solution for Brookline housing and helping vulnerable populations. We need a long-term plan, and we need an immediate solution. This resolution, as proposed by the advisory committee, takes care of the immediate need, which is feeding people and getting the money into the hands of the Brookline Community Foundation and the safety net program so they can in fact do that. Thank you.
Ms. Hamilton?
I'll just do a time check because, we have other warrant articles that we're supposed to take up. So if we want to move a different language, I suggest that we get to it.
I'm not sure if the moderator will accept it this late unless it's a minor change.
Okay, do you think the moderator would accept taking out the aid issue?
I would, if I were you, I would probably make the motion, and then if he rejects it, then you can have a backup motion of the advisory committee, if that's what you're looking for.
I would support that.
If the change is accepted by the moderator, this is your motion. If it's not accepted, then an affirmative vote on the motions that are in front of you.
Okay, so I'll move the advisory committee first motion, the advisory committee motion without the aid and credit or the anti-aid paragraph.
Whereas clause. So I think that's important.
Right, the recital involving anti-aid. And I would suggest the correction to the last paragraph, changing community to advisory committee, because I think that was the intention. So that's my motion. All in favor?
Well,
Ms. Heller?
Sorry.
Pardon?
No, sorry, just a brief discussion, or actually a question.
Sure.
So Deborah, I think you see where this is going. Are you all still planning on moving this updated version at town meeting? And then my question, I guess, for Melissa would be, what is the order in which we'd vote at town meeting if that happens?
So the order, I believe that the order is that the supplement 4 will be voted first. If that fails, then we would go to supplement 3. I would imagine that the moderator doesn't want a third motion to entertain. So that's why I'm cautioning you to take a position on each of the supplements. And then if you have a revised motion, we can see whether or not he'll allow it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, so I made the motion, the advisory committee resolution without the anti-aid paragraph in the recitals and correcting community to advisory committee in the last paragraph, which I think is paragraph 5. All in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez.
I'm gonna say aye, but with the understanding that we're going to vote on the other supplements in a second, right?
No.
Oh, isn't that what Melissa just asked us to do?
So
What we're
this,
going to vote for in a second is the original advisory committee resolution as written.
Oh, I think that's not what Melissa just asked us to do, though.
No,
So-
that's our fallback position. If
I need a main motion from the select board. Bernard is moving an amended version of the petitioner motion. As a backup, if the moderator does not allow that, I need the board to pick either supplement 3 or supplement 4 to support, or no action on the whole thing.
Got it. Aye.
Okay, where are we? Mr. Van Scoyoc.
I'm voting aye, but I have to ask Melissa, I'm sorry, you said that Bernard is moving the amended petitioner motion, but isn't he moving the amended advisory committee?
You're correct, John, yes. So Bernard's motion is the amendment to the advisory committee motion, striking the aid language, and then adding the word advisory committee in place of community.
I think he's also, I think he's also, he's not voting on the petitioner's amendment to the advisory committee motion.
That's what we just
Correct.
clarified. So it's
Right.
supplement 3, striking the aid language, and
Okay.
then adding advisory committee in place of community at the very
Right.
last.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Van Scoyoc voted aye,
Yes.
and chair votes aye also. So now let's go to Plan B. This is I move favorable action on the advisory committee's resolution passed at, I think, about 10:30 last night, or maybe it was a little earlier than that. And that is, what do you call it, Melissa?
Supplement 3.
Supplement 3. Okay, which is without any of the changes proposed by the petitioners. So, all in favor, Ms. Heller?
Well, what about the change of striking the anti-aid?
No, this would be a clean advisory committee resolution, and it's our fallback position in case the moderator.
Okay, aye.
That's all. Okay, all right.
Okay, aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez,
No.
Mr. Van Scoyoc,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Okay.
Do I need to then move the other amendment? Or
Yeah, I
were
guess
we
you
done
can.
voting on this now?
Well, you can move it.
Oh, is that Melissa, or is it?
So typically, Raul, you should have put that on top of Bernard's motion of supplement 3. Your amendment to supplement 3 would have been the petitioner motion under supplement 4.
Well, that's easy. Anybody else following this?
You want to vote on supplement 4?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all in favor, Ms. Heller,
No.
Ms. Hamilton,
No.
Mr. Fernandez,
Yes.
Mr. Van Scoyoc,
No.
and chair votes no. So you have your record on that.
All the votes need, I think.
Okay. Okay, you have that written down, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to call the moderator very soon to let him know what we're doing, but if maybe we can get started on Article 8, and then
Okay.
I know Heather's up to speed on 8, so that I can try and see if I can get a hold of him just to see where we're at with this change. So Article 8, you have in your supplement the motion of the advisory committee, essentially, and you also have the O'Neill motion, which I believe you guys took up last week. So the advisory committee struck the language around the alternate position, and they stayed where they were in terms of number of members. And I'll let Heather kind of take it from there. I believe I'm not sure that the HAB has met, and so I don't know that there is a formal vote from the HAB on this most recent change.
No, I'm kind of hoping that we don't get to this warrant article because we're actually scheduled to meet. The HAB is meeting tomorrow evening at 5. So it would be nice to get a vote from them on this latest version. But my understanding after many, many conversations, because this has been as much of a moving target, I think, as the budget amendments. My understanding is that the AC reached an agreement that I think it's a total of 9 members, and 2 of those members will be low and moderate income. One will be specifically from a BHA property. One will be moderate to low income, not necessarily a managed BHA property or Section 8, some sort of managed program that the BHA oversees. They struck the alternate member because that was starting to become very controversial. So that's what's being moved. And if Deborah wants to talk about, the point of view of the original petitioner, now would be an opportunity.
Sure. I think we're comfortable with 10 and 3. Really, the issue is having enough of a critical mass of people from low and moderate income backgrounds with some familiarity in housing issues to actually serve on the board. I know that folks are going to say, oh, that's too many, but I think that it's really important that people's voices are heard. One of the things that I constantly hear is that this is a technical board. And I think it presumes that you could have people from different backgrounds who don't bring technical issues to the table. So one technical issue that I brought up last week was, when you start talking about what kind of work HAB should be doing, you're not going to get that unless you have a different kind of membership. If you're talking about, would HAB money be used to maybe refurbish a property versus, contributing to build a new property? A tenant's perspective might be very different from an attorney, a real estate developer. You see where I'm coming from. So I think that as we begin to talk about expertise and who's a professional and what they bring to the table, I think we undervalue the kinds of insights that I think are going to be really important as Brookline moves to its next phase of low income and affordable housing. So that's it in a nutshell. And I don't think 2 is enough. I think 2 is just enough to have the perception that that there's an inclusivity and a real opportunity to be heard. Rather, I think it's just an opportunity to marginalize the 2 people that are there. And I absolutely disagree with the idea that you are going to have a non-voting member, and that non-voting member would be somebody from a lower moderate income background. That just smacks in the face of probably any and everything that I think most people in Brookline believe in. So
I'm going to respectfully take issue with a couple of points. One, the non-voting member is no longer an issue, so we could take that off the table. The other 2 issues, so in proposing 3 non-technical and staying to 10 members, I believe that means that we have to replace someone with technical skill. Is that correct?
If we go 3 non-technical and you have 9?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I was saying 10 and 3. If you want 9 and 3, you have a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then one of my issues resolves itself.
But hang on, because your use of the term non-technical, I disagree with fundamentally. I just
Because
don't
they are a
believe
tenant
that just
perspective.
I mean, I'm an attorney, and God knows I've had a lot of non-attorneys school me on legal matters, or matters that were germane to a particular issue at hand. And so just because somebody doesn't have, potentially a paper credential behind them does not mean that they are not in some way a subject matter expert in the area of low income and affordable housing. So I think we have to be careful about that. And so that 3, they may well be doing double duty, but they also may be augmenting and bringing a skills mix to the have that it doesn't have.
I don't necessarily disagree, and we can find a word choice that that we're both comfortable with. What I'm uncomfortable with is the assumption that the current membership on the board is not serving the purpose that the board is its mission, and that only by expanding it to include not 1, not 2, but now 3 residents from various properties or backgrounds, only then can we accomplish this goal. I have now served on the Housing Advisory Board. I've had some interaction with it, chairing the Kent Street Affordable Housing, and it is a technical board. There is a difference between the Housing Advisory Board, the housing authority in town, and a community development corporation. And I think that those nuances are getting lost in the mission of the housing authority. You can speak right after I'm finished. But from my perspective, I think that this board needs to be well-versed in housing finance. That is the primary mission of what they do. And so I will respectfully disagree with adding 3 people that cannot jump right in and look at the numbers. Housing finance is a very specific field, and just because you're a housing advocate doesn't mean that you're going to be able to contribute to the conversation in a very meaningful way.
And
So how many people are you proposing be added, Ms. Hamilton?
Right now, I believe the advisory committee's version has, they are adding 1 more member. So it goes from 8 to 9 with two people
The
with
good thing about 9 is that it's not an even number. And I do think in a board that it's good practice to not name even numbers of board members, because then you have a hard time breaking a tie.
Now, I promised Ms. Brown an opportunity to speak after I was done. So this should be that opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I well understand the difference between have, BHA, and BIC. And I think that most of the people that I've talked with clearly understand the distinction between these entities. And I will agree that much of HAB's responsibilities is on the financial side, but the underpinnings of that financial piece are policy issues. It's policy, and it's policy that goes to the benefit of this town, and in particular, low income and moderate income people. And if you minimize how they can make contributions to the discourse, then I think that we are not just undervaluing, the contributions that folks can make, but I also think in a way we are reducing the kinds of housing options that the HAB could and should be considering. And you might say that feels a lot like mission creep. But I'm saying that much like we had the 2016 housing, plan, I'm saying that if you had different people, then maybe that plan would look a little different. If you had different people, maybe the implementation would be a little different, but you don't have those people. And so my point is that you just need that mass to be able to develop and implement policies that align the financial decisions with the kinds of housing policy decisions that the end users will most appreciate. And ultimately, I would hope that the broader Brookline community.
Okay, Ms. Hamilton, can I ask you, the advisory committee would add 2 additional members, low-income members, and both of them would be voting members?
They would only add 1 additional. So right now,
But there'd
under
be 2 low-income, and they'd be both voting.
yes,
Okay,
We
I'm
have
sorry.
one now.
two
We're
total,
not
yes.
Advocate, so I'm not, you know,
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Ms. Hamilton?
we've had one now for many
Right.
years.
So
And
this
she's
would
been- she's been effective,
1
so.
person. Yeah.
I just, if I can just jump in,
Yeah.
I really haven't heard, I was going to say any good arguments, but I don't think I've heard any arguments about as to how, outside of the number of members, how this would be a detriment to the decision making on the board. I think it is the argument that more people from low income backgrounds would somehow hurt the work of this board, or would somehow slow it down, impede it in some way. It is beyond condescending, frankly. I've been listening to this debate now for weeks in our meetings, and I've been reading what people have been saying. I cannot for the life of me come up with one reason why someone would say this would hurt the decision making of this board. If we think we need more technical people on the board, let's expand the size of the board and let's do that. But this is just, it's beyond. It's absolutely beyond for me. And it's, if this was a board, we have other really important boards as well. This term, we start designating boards that are technical and those that aren't. If the folks that are on the technical side of this board cannot convince the lay people on the board that going in this direction instead of that one is the right move, then maybe we should be questioning their ability to do their jobs. But the fact that we would question the contributions that somebody from the exact people that we're trying to serve and support here, that their contributions somehow would get in the way of us getting things done is as I said, beyond condescending.
Okay, Ms. Hamilton, do you want to, okay, Mr. Van Scoyac, and then I'd like to ask Ms. Hamilton to make a motion since she's a member of the HAB.
I just have to respond to my respected colleague, Mr. Fernandez. That argument is pure Alice in Wonderland to me. We have a board which, among housing trusts in the state, is the only one that has set aside a position for tenant as it has done its work over the years. The board, which was the only one that set aside a position for a tenant, did its work, has had a reputation for being very effective at what it does, until suddenly within the past year, after there was a vote at town meeting that went against some people who wanted it to turn out one way in terms of allocation of some money for some housing, but it turned out the other way. All of a sudden, this board is being put into disrepute for being condescending towards tenants, not respecting tenants, resisting tenants when it's had a tenant member, 1 of 7, only board in the state. The board went along with the proposal, and the initial inclination of the HAB members was to double the number of tenants, increase the board size to 9. Suddenly, not only is this board being held into disrepute for not having enough tenants when it was always the only board in the state that had a tenant, now doubling the number of tenants is further indication of condescension because it's not tripling the number of tenants. People are just making up standards here so that they can turn around and say, the board is being condescending to tenants. I don't accept it. And the board, after being subjected to this, scrutiny, and in concert with the advisory committee, finally last night, the advisory committee came around and decided that it just wasn't going to work to go to 10, that the proposal for 2 tenant representatives plus an alternate tenant representative kept getting labeled as further condescension to tenants. So they took that off the table and said the one configuration they could agree on was 9 and 2, 9-member board, 2 tenants. And that's where it stands. And that's where I'm ready to vote support of the advisory committee recommendation. But I utterly reject this attempt to take good work that's been done over the years for the benefit of tenants and for the benefit of the town and turn it into some kind of record of condescension to tenants. It's just Kafkaesque.
Okay.
I don't understand most of the references, John. However, what I will say is that that no one is impugning the Housing Advisory Board at this moment. Certainly, I did not in my remarks. I'll play them back. The question here is there seems to be an indication that somehow as you add more people, again, folks need to remember why this thing exists in the first place. It's to support the exact people that we're talking about adding more voices to this board. It's beyond me. It's as if we were talking about the Disability Commission and quibbling over whether or not there should be more than 2 people on the Disability Commission, or the Women's Commission and quibbling about whether there should be more than 2 women on the Women's Commission. It's absolutely ridiculous. So to frame folks who want greater representation by those most impacted by the decisions of this board as somehow now it's all about whether or not we're speaking poorly about the Housing Advisory Board, and that should be our primary concern, not whether or not those most impacted by issues related to housing are represented in those decisions. Come on. I mean, come on. That's again beyond. I think maybe we're done. Maybe we can start voting.
Yes, Ms. Hamilton, will you do a resolution or motion?
Can we please move the AC's version 9 and 2 so that we're on the same page if it passes?
Okay. All in favor?
Can I make one more point, Richard, quickly, which is that, I'm going to support the AC version. I like limiting it to 9. I don't want to go to 11, and 10 is an even number, and I think that can hamper a board in terms of moving ahead. And so we have had a very effective tenant advocate on the board for all these years, and adding another one is a good thing. It actually ups the percentage if we're going from 1 to 7 versus 1 to 9, 2 to 9. So I don't have a problem with it.
Okay, before we vote, let me take privilege of the chair to make my or state my observation here. I think at least with some people, not necessarily everyone, but one of the issues is that the tenant representative, Rita McNally, is white. And I'd say that because that does raise a legitimate issue, and that is a board like this not having a membership involved, including people of color. That's not something we can solve tonight, but it is something that I think should be, on the sort of background agenda of the having other town boards and commissions, going forward. But that's just my opinion. All in favor of?
Can I just add one sentence to that thought? That is a responsibility of this select board to make sure that we are recruiting as many voices to our boards and commissions, including the Housing Advisory Board. So that's definitely on us. And I know that we we wear that responsibility very heavily.
Yeah, I should have added that. So all in favor of Mrs. Hamilton's motion, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Mr. Ms. Hamilton. I'm sorry, I'm looking in the chat box, so I'm distracted. Ms. Hamilton. Mr. Fernandez.
No.
Mr. Van Scoyac.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay. It is 6:21 and town meeting begins at 7 o'clock. Is that correct?
We have a number of warrant articles that we may still need to take up, although we may not get to them tonight in town meeting.
So I have an update on your earlier vote. I heard back from the moderator. He's not allowing further edits to the motion under special town meeting warrant article 1. So your position is supplement 3.
Okay.
Article 10 is fairly straightforward. That might be one that potentially we could get to tonight. So if we could do that one, that would be great.
Okay, let's do that
I'm
one.
sorry, Melissa, he's not allowing supplement 4?
No, he's not allowing additional edits at this point. It's too close to town meeting.
In other words, it's not allowing our amendment to the advisory committee.
That's a shame. It might have been a good compromise.
Yeah, so we're gonna have that fight on the floor of town meeting.
So Article 10, you should have a supplement number 1, which is a technical amendment moved by the advisory committee. Essentially what it's trying to do is to clarify that if a condo association doesn't have any governing documents that prohibit Airbnbs, that they would still need to provide permission if an owner would like to operate in the building.
Okay, so we have to reconsider warrant article 3 in order to accept that, as I understand.
Warrant Article 10, yes.
I'm sorry, guys, it's so early in the evening, I'm getting tired already.
It's one of the short-term rental warrant articles, correct?
Yeah, no, yeah, okay, so I move reconsideration. All in favor? Ms. Heller?
Aye.
And Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So the question is whether we accept those relatively minor amendments to warrant article 10. Can you go over them again?
Sure. So I can call it up if you need me to, if that
Yes,
helps.
please.
All right, so just I have to flip. I have too many screens going right now, so
I should write this down since I'm speaking on these warrant articles.
Yes.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yep. Just need to connect to my VPN, so. Okay. This is it.
Is the number 4 new?
I believe it is. So the old language is here. It's struck. I can go back to the original article if you want to see it cleanly.
And does anyone need that?
No, these are just the amendments, so.
Yeah, I think it's straightforward. Okay, any discussion? No? Okay, I move.
Well, wait a second. What the language that is really not a sentence, what they struck, is they add stuff?
I would be happy to explain this. What you have in front of you is very confusing. It's being presented in a way that isn't what I did. If that would be helpful for me to explain.
Yes, please.
Okay, so just briefly, just very, very briefly, Scott Gladstone, who is a town meeting member and attorney who brought the last short-term rental warrant articles, if you recall, he asked the advisory committee for a technical clarification so that, if the condo association of 4 or less, if their bylaws were silent, essentially, he just wanted to make sure that they, that it was clear in here how they would act. So he agreed with the advisory committee to add. The language actually added is, and the condominium association applicable documents, bylaws, or other governing documents do not explicitly prohibit short-term rentals. And then those are the only words added. The cross out, I don't know where that came from. Those are the
That's the original language, Paul.
Okay, those are the words that were added, and all it says is that that if the condominium documents are silent, then you have to have agreement from permission from the owners in the condominium. There's no change at all. It's the same thing. It's just a clarification, really.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
You can agree or disagree with that. It seems like a change, though.
Yeah, it is a change, but I mean, do you object to the change?
I mean, I do, but I'm happy to just vote no when we vote.
What would be your objection to that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think this is restrictive enough at this point. I mean, this is just adding further to it. So I think
Raul, just to be clear, you voted to approve this language last time. This literally is a clarification. You approved last time that anytime an owner from a 4-unit condominium came for an application, regardless of what their bylaws said, they would need approval from the other owners. That's what you approved.
So why is this necessary then?
Well, again, because the individual, Scott Glassman, who's a lawyer, specialty in this area, said, it would be best if you clarified it so that if it's not clear, so if they don't specify it in the bylaws, which means basically it's silent, then you would need to get agreement from the other tenants. It literally is.
All right.
It literally is the same way. I mean, we could have not done it and just left it. I mean, frankly, but he suggested a clarification, and the advisory committee agreed.
Yeah, I'm fine.
This is the original language here, so you can see what was the previous, the language before the amendment.
And it does seem to say exactly what the change says.
Okay. Let's go along with the advisory committee. I move approval of the advisory committee change as indicated. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, are we at Article 18? Because apparently I have a out-of-date agenda. Is the next one Article 18?
I believe it is.
Okay, ranked choice voting. This should be a pretty quick and easy one, but it's not going to be, okay?
So there is the revised petitioner motion that was in the supplement. I don't believe it. Oh, it is marked up against the original motion, so I can call that up for you now.
So can someone just make sure I'm up to speed on this whole issue? So the state overall voted no, correct?
Correct.
And
We're
Brookline
just asking
voted,
for our authority to do it.
so
yeah.
we would have to file a home rule petition
Yep.
To do it
Because-
for municipal.
for just this municipality that
Right.
yes. Okay.
Well, this article, this is a resolution that's asking the board to create a committee to study the issue.
I see. Well, but in the end result would be a home rule petition,
All right.
correct?
If that's what the committee recommends.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to go with the voters, okay.
Okay, any discussion of warrant Article 18? Okay, I move favorable action on warrant Article 18 as amended. And this is, okay, amended by the advisory committee.
This is the petitioner revised language.
Okay, has the advisory committee accepted it?
I don't know if Scott is here. I don't know if they've taken this up yet, so.
Okay, so we may get this back again, huh?
Well, Dr. Fernandez, I think is one of the co-petitioners. Do I have that wrong?
Yeah, no, you have it right. I'm not aware of whether or not the AC is weighed in on this though.
What do you think?
Were you talking to me or?
No, I'm sorry,
Rachel?
Mr. Fernandez. What's your view?
I feel like
Since
we've
you're the
gotten down.
petitioner.
I feel like we've gotten down at this point almost to semantics, frankly,
Okay.
between the different versions is where we are right now. I'm happy to I know that some changes were made earlier in the process after engaging with the advisory committee. I don't see anything here that strikes me as out of bounds. I don't know if you all do, but I'm happy.
I think I think the only sticking point that I've heard is whether or not we're having the debate about whether to pursue ranked choice voting as a municipality, whether that debate belongs in town meeting at this current town meeting, or if this appointed committee should first take that up as one of their charges and then move on to, if so, then how.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm persuadable either way.
I mean, I would say, in a high turnout election, 70% of Brookline residents indicated that they are in favor of ranked choice voting. I say let's do the work and then at another town meeting have a final debate about it before.
Okay, that sounds like a good motion. I see Mr. Namian is here. Can you quickly put in your 2 cents?
Yeah, I apologize. I was on the YouTube and I switched over and I missed a little bit there, but what Select Board Member Fernandez says sounded right to me. I think the only difference was there was a whereas clause, the AC removed, which we just removed as well to stay consistent. And the debate is just about the whether or not. And I think I've stated before to the Select Board, my position is I don't think this is a debating society. I just want to know. I want to have a report at the end of the day which says what the best option for Brookline would be if we were to adopt it, and then we can take that to the town and town meeting to say to do a home rule petition as Select Board Member Heller has suggested.
Okay, Mr. Fernandez, will you do a resolution that articulates what it is that we're talking about here that everyone seems to agree to?
You mean a motion?
A debate after the report as opposed to debate early.
I think he is asking for a motion.
Right, yes. Yeah. So isn't this as simple as moving the petitioner's language? Do we need to indicate anything more than that?
Is it, okay, yeah, that's all we need to do.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so okay, petitioner's language is moved. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyoc?
I have to ask a question. So the petitioner's language is no longer the advisory committee's language?
Right.
The advisory committee hasn't considered it.
Well, but
at all?
They did consider it. That was, I mean, we're
they haven't reconsidered it.
All that has been done is removing text. There are no additions here. So the AC added the whether or not. We never did to our motion. Then the AC deleted a whereas clause, and we thought that was fine, so we adopted that part.
Okay,
but there's no additions.
Okay, Mr.
But at some point, this went from being a motion to report on how to implement ranked choice voting to being a report to study whether to implement. And I'm just asking, does this version we're voting on now preserve that distinction? That it's a study whether to implement and how, as opposed to it's a study aimed at instructing us on the implementation of ranked choice voting.
Well, no, it says the office to study whether or not to adopt ranked choice voting for town elections and issue a report, including, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right. Originally, that was not the petitioner's motion. And I'm just asking, when we say we're for the petitioner's motion, which petitioner's motion are we for?
The petitioner's motion is to study the implementation of. Again, it's not presuming that we're going to implement. It's just that the report should say, lay out what the actual equipment required would be. The whether or not, I think, is up to a future town meeting to decide. It's not the subject of the report.
So it's the how.
It's the how, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I'm going to say no, because this doesn't reflect what I understood we had moved to, which was away from this notion of it's presumed that the result of this study will be a report on how to implement ranked choice voting, to a position of we will study the advantages and disadvantages of ranked choice voting, and then determine whether, and then it'll be up to, based on the study, for town meeting to determine whether they want to implement ranked choice voting.
okay, so,
Yeah.
chair votes yes. So, okay.
Thank you very
Warrant
much.
Article 29, is that next?
So warrant article 29, the board wanted to wait and see the advisory committee's position. You had the
Yeah.
Spiegel amendment and the Bassett amendment. The advisory committee accepted the Spiegel amendment, but did not accept the Bassett amendment. And the advisory committee report is supplement 3 in your combined reports.
Which warrant
Okay.
article is this again?
29.
29.
Right, with the subject matter.
Modify advisory
modify
committee
advi-
membership.
Ah,
And what did Stanley, Mr. Spiegel's amendment say? As
I
opposed to
bel-
Ms. Bass?
Yep.
That
I
the
can-
advisory committee accepted.
Sure, just give me a minute. So the number of committee members who are not town meeting members shall not exceed 10.
Okay.
And they accepted that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
that's
I
not
went-
the current case.
No. And I agree with the 10.
Wow, I
Okay.
totally thought that that was already in place.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, that means that more members would be town meeting members, who've been elected, and I think that's important.
Okay, any other questions? Ready to vote? I move approval of the advisory committee position, which includes Stanley Spiegel's amendment, but not John Bassett's amendment. All in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Abstain?
Abstain, you say? Okay. Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, next, 34, affordable housing. Okay, this is gonna be a long discussion.
So we may want to wait and do this at your next meeting, because I don't think we'll get to it in the next 2 nights. So.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, and how about 39? Is there any controversy there?
39, there was an amendment that Representative Vitolo
Oh, that's right.
proposed to hopefully ease the legislative process.
Yeah.
I believe that the advisory committee has accepted that, so now it is just up to the board to come in line.
And have the petitioners, I thought the petitioners also accepted it.
I believe so.
So I have not heard from the petitioners their position on this, and I know that the moderator also reached out
Okay, the
and has
petition,
not heard back.
yeah, the petitioners are here so they can speak, although I can't imagine what they'd say other than, yes, we agree with Tommy Vitolo that this is how you do things in the legislature, but at any rate.
Well, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't see the video, but if you can hear me, that's good enough. So this is Jesse Gray, TMM10. First of all, thank you for co-sponsoring this with us. I don't know that it properly shows it in the documentation that the select board is a co-sponsor on this warrant article. And as a co-sponsor with us on this warrant article, you know, we ultimately defer to your judgment on this revision that's coming from the advisory committee. The way I see it, you know, you have an enviable choice. You can go with the smartest politician in Brookline and maybe the state, I don't know, that's Tommy Vitolo. Or you can go with the smartest lawyer in the state, which is Ray Miares, who's advised us on this and who drafted the original version of this warrant article. The substantive choice that you have on this is that first of all, there's a 30-day implementation difference. So there's a delay of 30 days. No one's debating that. That's not a big deal. But the second one is that in the original version, the select board retained the right to approve any substantive changes that the legislature wants to make. And this is a very standard way of doing things. Our lawyer recommended writing it this way because he has seen shenanigans that don't involve necessarily a town's own representative. So it wouldn't be a shenanigan that Tommy Vitolo would be playing, but other kinds of shenanigans. If the board preserves its right to weigh in on this, then those kinds of shenanigans, the watering down of this legislation, can be prevented by this board if it so chooses in the future. So our lawyer has recommended that we reject this change to prevent those kinds of shenanigans and that kind of watering down. So with that said, we would defer to you, the board, as our co-sponsor, and if you're okay giving up that power, then we will agree with you.
Well, are the two things connected?
They don't have to be, but they are in this particular amendment. Both changes were made simultaneously, but they don't have to be connected.
Was it Tommy's advice that we give it up? For political reasons?
Yes. So if I may jump in here, Jesse, is that okay?
Yeah, ask me. Yes, it's okay.
So I was on a call, I believe, last week with the petitioners and Tommy Vitolo, Representative Vitolo, and he was basically explaining there are a number of ways that you can ask for home rule petition, and one of those ways is the way that this current petition warrant article was set up, which was to give the select board the authority to accept any changes that are made or proposed at the State House. Tommy was advocating for a different way, which is to have them keep him abreast, and it's a lot more open. It's the most flexible version of home rule. I could definitely see where there may be some room for shenanigans. So it really comes down to our faith in Representative Vitolo and his faith in his fellow colleagues. So I would feel more comfortable putting my eggs in the Vitolo basket, just because my only concern with retaining control at the select board level is that I've seen how jam-packed our calendars are. And we spent a number of weeks arguing about a 30-day delay. And that could very well happen if we retain control. I could see, us struggling to find time on our calendar to address this. And then we've added 2 months to implement this.
Okay. Does anyone object to going with the Vitolo approach? Not the perfect approach, but maybe the one
No,
that
I would just comment that if it gives if it gives us a greater chance of getting something, it's better to get something than nothing.
Right.
And so I would go with it.
Yeah. And we're relying on Tommy Vitolo to protect our interests. So.
Right.
And I'll just say, maybe give him some more, to do his best to protect our interests. There are things that happen in the State House, and
yeah, that's always the case.
Yeah, and I'll say, if anyone knows me, I'm no fan of shenanigans. But I think I agree with the rest of the board. Let's give Tommy an opportunity to do everything in his power to work this through at the State House.
Okay. Any other comments? If hearing none, I move approval of warrant article 29 as amended with Mr. Vitolo's suggestions. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanskoya?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay. That's it? Or is there anything else?
We'll do 34 at your next meeting.
Right, okay. That's a wise decision. Okay.
May I ask a question? Did Phoebe show up?
No, she actually emailed me mid-meeting saying that something conflict came up, so she's not able to join us.
So I'm just glad that she hasn't been waiting all this time. Good.
Oh yeah, I would have let you know.
Okay, great. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no problem. Okay, meeting's over. Bye. See you at town meeting.
At town meeting.
Okay.